Hello and welcome to Being the Foundation podcast. My name is Emily and I am the world's okayest teacher. I am what I would like to call a newly qualified teacher, although I qualified last year around about this time. And I have been teaching in Doha ever since. So I thought I would bring you along what I have learned in my first year of teaching and things that I can maybe bring to your table, things that maybe you could think about. I am a teacher who has ADHD and I was recently diagnosed. Well, not so recently, but kind of recently. I was diagnosed of March of this year, which is 2023, in case you're watching this way in the future. And that has really changed the way that I do teaching, how I approach things in the classroom, because I think of how I would like things to be handled and things that accommodate and work for me. A lot of things are overwhelming and overstimulating within the teaching environment. So what I've done is create an environment that works out better for me and is a little bit easier. So we are just going to start off really strong and start with classroom management, behavior management within the classroom, and how that might affect you as a teacher, as well as how to successfully add boundaries and things into your classroom. Have you ever had a day at school where you totally feel like a witch and all you did all day was scream and shout and nobody was listening, none of it was effective, and by the end of the day you're exhausted, the kids are exhausted, and you all just need a break from each other? Well, same, because we all have those days. Things sometimes just get too much for all of us, which is completely normal. But we don't want that to be reoccurring. It's really exhausting, really tiring, and teaching as a profession as a whole is already completely overstimulating, very overwhelming. And so we need to make sure that we have effective things in place in order to support not only the kids in our classroom, but ourselves. So, of course, I am no expert. I've literally just started teaching, and I'm sure if you speak to teachers with a lot more experience than me, they could give you way more tips. But here's what I've found so far. So I was fortunate enough, actually, in the aspect of being able to start the school here in Doha in term 2. And I started with a new class, obviously. For me, it was new, but for them, it was not. And they were used to their old teacher's way of doing things. And every teacher is different. So every teacher has different methods that work for them and that work for the kids. So it was a bit like touch and go. It was really challenging in the beginning because I had no relationship with those children. I didn't start the school year with them. I had no idea what they liked or what they disliked. And there was just no relationship or real bond there from both sides. It's just this new lady standing in front of us, and who is she? And like, I miss my old teacher because they are only 4 and 5 years old, and I'm coming into a new country, into a brand new profession, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so everyone kept telling me, build the healthy relationships, and I was just like, it was coming out of my ears, and I was just like, can you just shut up about building healthy relationships, because I don't understand what you mean, and it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't feel like I'm being supported in this moment with you telling me to please build healthy relationships, but nobody's giving me examples. I have no idea what that means. But now coming into a new school year, here in Doha, and starting fresh, brand new, I was able to set up my classroom. I was able to have the kids come in for the first time into Foundation 2 with me as their teacher, and it was all brand new for them and it was all brand new for me, and it felt great. So from the moment they stepped into my classroom, it immediately started with relationship building. Now, if you are working with really young kids who are really actually coming to school for the first time, this is really, really important. So we have a few weeks, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks, where we had baseline. And in this baseline, it wasn't just about testing and making sure about where they are on this tracker and where are they in terms of the curriculum and things. It was really more about taking the time to build the relationships. Now, I know this is not always possible, especially in a more formal teaching setting where I am not currently at. It is a formal teaching setting, but we do a lot of playing, we do a lot of lead-out learning, we do a lot of things like that. So it's not always sit at your desk and do what you need to do. So that plays a very big role. But what I would encourage you to do in order to build these so-called healthy relationships that everyone talks about, I wish there was a different word to use, because it just feels like that is so ineffective. And sometimes when that is all you hear, it's like, I don't know, I just don't even care about these healthy relationships anymore. But it is so important to do that. So what I did was, I took the time, I left all my papers on my desk, I left everything on my desk, and I took the time to sit and play with the kids. What do you like? Where do you like playing? Taking notes, mental notes that is, about this child likes the construction area, this child is always in the role play area, this child loves Play-Doh. And it's like, well, it's the first day of school, it's the first week, I have no idea what their names are even at this point. But eventually you do get to know them well enough to know where they are. And I think this is where people get confused with healthy relationships. They want you to have this fun loving, I'm your best friend type of relationship with these kids. But you can't have that, because then when you come to your classroom management and your behavior management, you have now told or taught them that you are a friend and not an authority in the classroom, which you are. And authority has a very negative connotation to it, but I promise you, in this context, I don't mean it that way. I just mean that you are the one that is in charge. You are the adult. So you need to gain their respect, but also building a healthy relationship of knowing each child really, really well. What you could do with all the children is to literally ask them. You could ask them either verbally or to write it down, and then really take note of that and take interest in that. Don't just put it on the back burner. I gave them this worksheet and now I've read through it once and I'm just gonna, leave it out there and just carry on with what I'm doing. It's so, don't get me wrong, seriously challenging to build relationships, because it's just, how do you do that? It's just a matter of wanting the kids to become comfortable around you, that they can trust you, be comfortable in the classroom environment, which all forms part of this big picture of classroom management. So I guess today I'm kind of more focusing on what is happening in terms of behavior management. And that is the first step, is building these relationships with them. The next step would be to start building high expectations. Now you're thinking, high expectations for 4 and 5 year olds? What does that even mean? How do I have a high expectation of them at that age? And I didn't understand it either. Again, it was just floating around my head all the time. High expectations, setting these high expectations, making sure that they know what they need to do and what is expected of them. And it's like, how do I introduce that? And I've realized this year so far, we are only in term 1, that you need to be explicit with kids, especially of that age. They aren't going to put 2 and 2 together at that age. They have a sense of humor, which they are starting to build, but they don't understand sarcasm, for example. They don't always catch jokes. The jokes that they make is, who crossed the road? Why did the chicken cross the road? That is funny to them. That is what it is. So you need to be explicit with them. So you need to go over class rules. Of course, you have your class rules, and then you need to use the word, this is Miss Emily's expectation of you. And then explain what expectation means. So expectation means that I need you to do this for me to be able to carry on with my lesson. And this is also when, so high expectations and consistency go so hand in hand and arms intertwined that it's not even funny. Because at that age, they are going to forget. You have to remind them constantly. We are in week 12 and constantly I have to remind them, cross your legs, let's sit nicely, how do I expect you to sit? And that's when the expectation comes in, because you use the word, how do I expect you to sit? And they know automatically, I would like you to sit in a way that is comfortable, because now I'm going to go off in a little tangent now. I don't believe in you have to cross your legs. Me being ADHD, I can't sit still sometimes. It just is not possible. As you can see in the video, if you are watching the video, I'm moving my hands, I'm moving my body, because that is what I need to do to be able to focus. So I don't expect any child in my class to sit cross legs, to sit with their feet still, to sit with their arms in their lap all the time. What I expect you to do is to sit in a way that you can focus. And again, this is now jumping back to building relationships, knowing which children can and can't sit in a cross-legged position with their hands in their lap. So when I say to my kids, sit nicely, I don't mean sit cross legs, put your hands in your lap and zip your lips. That's not what I mean at all. Now, we talk about respect, and we have to teach them these values of respect and being kind and knowing that when my friend is talking or when my teacher is talking, I'm not allowed to talk right now. The expectation is that I put up my hand when I would like to say something. And this all happens within the first 5 weeks. And you really need to drill it into them. And now I'm going to go on to another tangent, because I loathe when people give the advice, especially to foundation phase teachers, to not smile at their kids for the first however many weeks. I feel like that is the biggest load of baloney I have ever heard. How can you be warm and inviting for 4 and 5-year-olds if you are going to sit there with a straight face and tell them, sit nicely? Look, it has to happen sometimes. They need to know when you're being serious. They need to know when it's time to focus. They need to know when it's time to have fun. In this instance, when you are laying down the ground rules of what you expect them to do in your classroom, you have to be stern and firm and consistent. Does this mean that you shout at them? No. You can speak in a lower tone voice, that they know you are serious, that they know you mean business, and trust me, as soon as you nail doing that, whenever you lower your tone of voice, they will know she means business. I need to sit nicely now and focus. So it's just consistency is key. And you know what does not work for me and does not work for the kids in my class? It does not work to say 1, 2, 3, all eyes on me, because it opens these floodgates into being able to just start talking. And I myself cannot be consistent with that. What I can be consistent with is setting high expectations. Now, when I've set these expectations, we talk about what is the consequence of if you are not meeting the expectations. Now, there are natural consequences and there are policy-based consequences. So we have policy-based consequences at school, and by policy I mean basically code of conduct. But the policy is that if you are not meeting the expectation that I have set, so if you are not sitting nicely according to my expectation, I have given you 3 warnings, it means you need time to think about that behavior. Now, this is now, I feel like I'm talking all over the place, so I'm really sorry about that, but it needs to be said. When a consequence happens, you explain to them why this consequence is happening. The consequence then happens, and afterwards you talk about it again. This is key, because do you know what? I hated at school is you would just get into trouble and no one told you why. And you as a child, you actually are quite oblivious to the fact that I got in trouble because of. And when you start giving a reason, then they realize, so if I do that again, I'm going to have this consequence again, and I did not like that, so I'm not going to do this specific thing again. And you would think that kids at this age won't make those connections, but trust me, they do. So don't underestimate them. That is probably the biggest lesson I have learned since being in teaching, is do not underestimate these kids, because trust me, they understand. So the natural consequence, for example, is I have a child in my class, the one day randomly threw food in the class. I went to him. I was clearly upset because now there's food all over my floor, and that obviously made me very upset. This is where me as an adult had to regulate my own emotions, which is not always easy. I went to him, I crouched down to his level so that he could see my eyes. I lowered my tone of voice and I asked him, why did you do that? And he was, whatever the reason was, I can't even remember. And I said, I did not like that you did that. That made me very upset, and you now need to clean this up. That is the natural consequence of making a mess, is that if you made the mess, it's you that has to clean it up. And yes, of course, I caved and I helped him clean it up. And then I asked him at the end of cleaning it up, did you enjoy cleaning all of that food off of the floor? No, not really. I would have rather not have done that. And then asked him the question, do you think you would do that again? And most likely the answer is going to be no, because it's not fun to clean food up off the floor. And on a complete side note, I hate food messes in my classroom. I hate it. It just, it is my worst nightmare. Firstly, all the smells of all the lunch boxes overstimulates me. And then, it's just, anyway, it's not my jam. But nonetheless, we carry on. And so the consistency here is that every time a child does it, every time that behavior happens, there has to be a follow-up consequence. And it takes so much out of you as a teacher. And this is sometimes why I come home so exhausted, is when the behavior management in your classroom is a struggle. And some days it will just be a struggle. That is just unfortunately how it goes. It will be a struggle. Some days just go that way. But when you get your behavior management under control, it's one thing less that you have to worry about. It's obviously a consistent thing. And another thing that comes with consistency is equality in the class. Some teachers, they end up favoring children and, this child is just extra cute and I could just eat them up, and so you let them get away with a little bit more, or it's a staff parent's child, or it's a staff member, like one of your colleagues' children. And so you just feel a little bit like, I can't say anything. And no, it's not effective because kids notice that. It's like, but when the staff child messed their food, for example, this didn't happen, but for example, wow, whoever's revving, that's really rude. Sorry about that. If a staff child, for example, were to spill their food, you help them. You're like, oh no, I'll do it. You sit down, you keep eating. But then when another child does it, you're like, no, you cleaning it up, because that's the natural thing that happens. And that's not consistency. That's also not equality. It has to be the same all throughout. And I think the biggest time waster of all time is not having a good classroom management system. Now, I would just like to say, let's talk about a reward system, right? We have reward systems in place because it's really important to know that you are rewarded for things. That, oh, you tucked in your chair, good job, okay, I will give you a class dojo point. But then you get to a point where that is not effective anymore. And that is where you kind of need to instill in them, or try your very best to instill in them, that reward is how you end up feeling about yourself. If they feel proud of themselves, like, wow, I remember to push in my chair, that means way much more than a dojo point. I'm sorry, my brain malfunctioned there for a second. My eye is so itchy. If you're watching this video, you can see I've been scratching my eye the whole time. I don't know. It's really, really itchy. Anyway, there's so much more I could say about behavior management and how do you deal with it and what is the right way to do it and what works for you. And behavior management is bespoke. And that's a word that I learned here. That's not a word we use in South Africa really, or that I'm aware of. And basically bespoke means that it's for you in your class, the kids in your class, what works for the kids in your class, what works for you as a teacher. Because what works for you as a teacher is actually the most important thing, because it's you that has to deal with it every day. It's you that has to focus on that every day. So you have to decide what works for you. What is your expectation that you want to set? What is your reward system that you're going to use? Are you going to use tangible rewards? Are you going to use physical rewards? There's just so many ways to go about it, and no way is wrong. Because if it works for you and you are able to save time and teach more because they are sitting and focusing, that works so much better. Now, don't get me wrong. Please don't misunderstand me. This could probably sound like management talking to you about build healthy relationships and set high expectations, and it's just so easy. It's not. I can guarantee you, from a person that has been in the position taking over a class where I had no control over that class for the whole time that I had them, and then to having control over my class now. These are the things that worked for me. These are the expectations that I have set for my kids, that I have had to remind myself to be consistent with, even when I am in no mood to deal with that behavior right now. It can't be ignored. You cannot ignore a behavior because you do not feel like dealing with it. You can't ignore a behavior because that's what people tell you to do. It doesn't work. Consistency is key. So if you write it down for yourself, and that's exactly what I did in the beginning of the year, before my kids even entered my classroom, I said, this is my expectations for the kids. This is the expectation for myself. That is also so important as a teacher, to have expectations for yourself and to be consistent with it. Even if that means setting reminders for yourself, which, believe me, I had to do because I would forget. Write it on post-it notes. Put it on your computer screen. Put it somewhere on your desk that you can see it, that you are reminded that the end goal, that hopefully by week 12, there has been some sort of consistency to make sure that just that little bit of edge of stress is taken off your shoulders, because it has made my teaching experience this year so far so much better. Having children who are used to the consistency of a high expectation and a good behavior setting. And don't get me wrong, please, I'm not saying my kids are not perfect, and they will never be. They will always push boundaries, and that is what kids do. It is so natural, so normal. You read about it in the textbooks. There's absolutely nothing wrong with pushing the boundaries at all. It needs to be pushed sometimes. It's how you deal with it, your attitude towards it, and your consistency with it. Because you will have kids in your class who are more challenging than others. You will have kids who are just having a bad day because they are tired, which, trust me, makes a big difference. You will have kids who are misbehaving because they are hungry. You have to consider all of those things. But nonetheless, those are not excuses to have a poor behavior day, but it's how you address it in the moment. And I am human. I've had moments of weakness in my class. I have moments where things slide. I have moments where I've shouted at kids when I knew I wasn't supposed to, when I really shouldn't have. And then you leave thinking, I was just a monster today, and why did I do that, and I shouldn't have done that, and the teacher guilt is so real. But just know that that is normal, and your feelings are valid too. And if you need any support, I'm not an experienced teacher, but if you just need someone to talk to, please feel free to send me a DM, send me an email. I am more than happy to help, be a listening ear. And that is the end of my podcast. Wow, I had no idea how to end that podcast, but thank you so much for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. If you're on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will be back probably next week, hopefully posting once a week on a completely different topic, which I have no idea what it might be. And be safe out there. You are doing your absolute best, and you are a superhero just being a teacher. Bye.